I remember even as a kid, I used to like ringing the bells at Mass. And every once in a while, we would have a priest that would come along and he wouldn't let us ring the bells. Oh, Vatican II did away with all those bells. And he wouldn't let us ring the bells. And it was just this sadness that would creep in. Why not? Why? This is the most important thing that ever happened in the whole entire world, and we're experiencing it here and now. Why can't we ring bells to celebrate it? We ring bells when we win wars. We ring bells when people die. We ring bells to celebrate and to mourn and to do all these other things. Why can't we ring bells, right? And it was this idea that Vatican II did away with all these things. To find out that Vatican II didn't do away with all those things was a great source of joy for me. I had this innate sense that ringing bells at important moments meant something, and it does mean something. There's also the kind of fancy vestments that you oftentimes will see priests wear. And I remember even in the seminary, you would hear these stories about how priests in the 60s, 70s, and 80s had gone through the sacristies of these old, beautiful old churches and thrown out, burned, buried all these gorgeous and beautiful vestments. Or if you preserve them, they're just in a museum. They're in behind glass on a display. Oh, this is the way we used to wear things. And then they would don instead very simple, no frills vestments, right? That didn't have anything but just one plain, pastel color and nothing else to it. And I remember saying, well, this is kind of an interesting way to approach the wedding feast of the Lamb. If the Mass is the wedding feast of the Lamb, we don't come in just wearing ho-hum mundane vestments. No, we bring our best. Right? When's the last time you went to a wedding and you just put your flip-flops and your sandals on, or your flip-flops and your shorts on, right? No, you put on a suit and tie. You put on your tuxedo. The bride goes and buys a dress that she will only wear one time in her life. Well, how much more should we buy and use and celebrate the holy sacrifice of the Mass with beautiful vestments that speak to our faith? Now, obviously, there's a balance here that we don't want to be distracting from the holy sacrifice, but does the bride's dress distract from the wedding? No, it adds to it. Like it's a holy distraction, right? It emphasizes something that's important, that the priest is not his own, that the priest has put on Christ. The vestments signal, it's not me anymore. It's Jesus. I put on the Lord our God, and it's God acting in his person. That's a powerful statement. And I think that the holy sacrifice of the Mass, the worship that we give to God, should be adorned with our best. Then we come into things like incense. Again, when I was an altar server, I loved being the one that did the incense, lighting the charcoals and swinging the thurible and getting all the incense ready, and just that sweet smell. But as always, you would have some priests that would say, no incense. Vatican II did away with all of that. We can't do too many of these superstitious things. You say, superstitious things? What do you mean? Well, again, I found the joy of our Catholic faith explained to me. Like when I read the Psalms and the Scriptures, and it said, like incense before rises, so may my prayer rise before your face, O Lord. Wow, that's what we're doing. That incense symbolizes our prayer rising before God. When the wise men brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh to Jesus, the baby Jesus, right? What is that frankincense? It's incense that's meant to be burned before a god. That's what we're doing. We're acknowledging that Jesus is God when we burn incense in the church. We also have the example of the temple worship of old. One of the sacrifices that they would have to make was the incense offering, right? They would come in and they would burn incense on the altar before the Holy of Holies to indicate the prayers of the faithful, the prayers of the people of Israel, offered up as a sacrifice of praise to God. So all of these things speak to us of our faith. They're not superstitions. They are incarnations that say and cry out and declare, this is God and this is holy. There's another aspect of, a traditional understanding of coming to Mass that I would like to emphasize. How would you go? We talked about the Mass as O Sacrum Convivium, right? The Sacred Banquet. Well, how would you go to a wedding feast, right? Sure, we've all been to that wedding feast that maybe they said, it's an outdoor picnic, everybody bring your flip-flops, your shorts, and your Hawaiian shirts. Okay, fine. But that's not the standard in most places. If you go even around the world, there's a universal phenomenon that weddings are somehow celebrated with dignity and reverence, that we put clothes on that we don't normally put on. And there's usually a little bit more formal, and we have to be kind of careful. Don't spill any of the food on your formal dress that you only bring out when there's weddings, right? We put on these formal dinners that have their own rituals, toasts, and particular types of foods, and a whole liturgy, if you will. Well, that's what we're doing when we come to the holy sacrifice of the Mass. And so it begs the question, how do I approach it? Do I approach it like a backyard barbecue? Is it a casual expression of faith? Well, that's kind of the way that it had been presented to me all my life. That's the way that so many people thought of church. The church should be casual, comfortable, inviting. We have this idea that it has to be convenient. We don't want to run people off. We have to be relevant. Well, in doing that and emphasizing those things, we quickly became irrelevant. Most young people are like, well, if it's just a flip-flop and T-shirt and shorts barbecue, I'd rather do that in my backyard than in the stuffy old church, right? If there's nothing important here, why am I getting up on Sunday morning to do it? And so we, in a sense, missed the mark. It's that kudzu analogy where we had good intention, but it failed to produce. Whereas when I discovered what the holy sacrifice of the Mass was and what the tradition of the church was and how our ancestors of faith had always worshiped and how many of our contemporary Catholic Christians throughout the world continue to celebrate this way, they put on their Sunday best. They comb their hair, they get up early, they come to Mass on Sunday, and they sit and they sit in the quiet. It's different. They kneel, they bend the knee in the presence of the divine. There's this sense of formality, which is an analogous way of saying reverence. And in all of these things, we see the joy of the traditional expressions of faith.